What if I told you some spirits never left their graves, and tonight they might be watching you? If you love ghost stories, hit subscribe, tap like, and share this video so we can bring you even more terrifying tales. Subscribe, like, share to keep the ghosts coming. There are stories whispered in the corners of the world that never die, stories that refuse to fade, no matter how many years pass. No matter how far the wind scatters the ashes of memory, they are like the roots of old trees, hidden, twisted, alive beneath the soil. The story of Satan's doll is one such tale. Born in the humid heart of Brazil, nurtured by superstition and blood, it is said to be not just a haunting, but an invitation to something far darker. The beginning was not fire or thunder, but silence. Silence so deep it pressed against the ears of the living and made them believe the forest itself was holding its breath. The village was called Cerrado do Inferno, the mountain of hell. Long before highways cut through the Amazon and satellite maps gave shape to forgotten places, this settlement stood like a secret among the trees. It was not marked on any government document. The only sign of its existence came from letters, faded, trembling words written by travelers who never came back to the locals. The forest was not just land, it was alive. It had moods, tempers, desires. There were rules to living near it, rules that were never written, but always obeyed. You never whistled after midnight. You never left mirrors facing the trees. And most importantly, you never brought something found back into your home. Because sometimes, the forest gave gifts that were not meant to be taken. It was 1920 when the first whispers began. A child had vanished. A girl named Caterina Burley, 6, disappeared while picking flowers near the old riverbank. The search went on for 3 days, torches flickering through the thick mist, prayers muttered under breath. On the 4th day, they found her dress, torn, damp, hanging from a branch, and at the base of that tree sat a doll. No one had seen it before. Its porcelain face was cracked, one eye a dull grey marble, the other black and shining. It wore a crimson dress stitched with tiny golden threads. The villagers brought it back to the chapel, thinking perhaps it belonged to Caterina, that she might have dropped it before she was taken. But the priest refused to bless it. He said the doll's eyes followed him, that it was whispering, though its lips never moved. He locked it inside the chapel, nailed the door shut, and warned the villagers to leave it alone. Yet, as all human hearts do when told to fear, curiosity bloomed. That same night, Father Almeida the priest was found dead. His body was kneeling before the altar, hands clasped in prayer, head turned completely backward. The doll sat at his feet. No animal touched his corpse. From that day, Cerrado do Inferno began to rot, not from disease, but from within. Cattle refused to eat, crops died, children woke screaming, claiming a small girl with a doll's face had whispered in their ears while they slept. Some said it was the spirit of Caterina. Others said it was something older, something that had worn the girl's face like a mask. And then there were those who remembered the witch. Before the doll, before the priest, there was Mariana Vasquez, a woman who lived at the edge of the forest, shunned by the village for her healing herbs and midnight prayers. They said she talked to the shadows, that she sang to the dead when a drought struck and the river dried. It was Mariana they blamed. She cursed us, they said. She consorts with the Filho das Cinzas, the son of ashes. The son of ashes, a name no one dared say twice in the same breath. They dragged Mariana from her home one morning, tied her to a stake in front of the chapel, and set her on fire. Before the flames reached her, she spat a curse. "You'll beg for mercy in the voice of a child. My spirit will return through her eyes. You will all kneel before innocence." The flames devoured her, but they said her screams turned into laughter before she died. The next night, smoke rose from the ashes of her home, and in that smoke, villagers saw the faint outline of a child holding something small and red. A week later, the doll appeared. Time has a way of erasing evidence, but not memory. Even now, locals who live near what remains of Cerrado do Inferno avoid the ruins. They say the chapel still stands half buried, leaning like a spine broken by the weight of its own sins. Inside, the air is heavy with dust and silence. The altar is cracked, but if you look closely, you can still see small scorch marks near the stone steps, like the fingertips of someone who tried to claw their way out of fire. And sometimes, on certain nights when the humidity makes the air thick as breath, travelers claim to hear something faint from within those walls, a sound too gentle to belong to the dead, a lullaby, hummed in the voice of a little girl. It doesn't echo like a song carried by wind. It vibrates inside the skull, behind the ears, just enough to make you wonder if it's real. Those who hear it say it follows them for days afterward, hidden in the spaces between silence. They hear it when water drips, when the kettle boils, when they close their eyes. The doll is gone, they say, lost decades ago, but the song remains. Asterisk, in 1989, Serra do Inferno was rediscovered not by believers, but by men with cameras. A small television crew from São Paulo, led by journalist Luciana Moreira, came to document forgotten legends of Brazil. Their goal was simple: to expose superstition, to reveal the beauty of folklore while debunking the fear that kept people chained to the past. They arrived in late May, at the start of the rainy season, when the forest turns into a living wall of water and mist. Locals in the nearby town of São Miguel begged them not to go. "You don't wake sleeping things," an old man said, clutching his rosary. "The doll is not a story. It's waiting." They laughed. They brought equipment, recorders, film reels, even a medium to add authenticity. When they reached the ruins, the air grew strangely cold. The forest was silent. Not even insects dared sing. The cameraman, Renan, noted in his journal that the birds had stopped halfway through the journey, as if the trees had swallowed their voices. The first night they heard the humming. Renan captured it on tape, faint, rhythmic, just under the threshold of hearing. The medium insisted it was residual energy, a harmless echo. But the next morning, they found their tent unzipped from the inside, muddy footprints circling their equipment. They followed them. The prints led to the chapel, and there, beneath the rotting beams, the doll waited on the altar, perfectly clean despite the years. Luciana picked it up. From that moment, the footage became strange. Static appeared whenever the camera pointed at the doll. Audio distorted into whispers. When slowed down, the whispers formed words Portuguese. Soft, childlike. "Amai me deixou sozinha." Mother left me alone, Renan wrote in his journal that night. It's colder near her. The forest feels like it's watching. Luciana says she feels sorry for the doll. "I think she's losing herself." The footage recovered later ends abruptly. 5 people went in. Only one came back. His name was Renan Costa, the cameraman, found wandering along a highway 5 days later, dehydrated and delirious. He had claw marks on his arm skin, like those of a child. He kept repeating the same phrase, "Eyes in the dark." The song won't stop. She wants to go home. When questioned by police, he could recall only fragments. Luciana had begun speaking to the doll, whispering to it, sleeping with it near her head. The others tried to leave, but something in the forest kept turning them back. Paths that led nowhere, compass needles spinning. Then, one by one, they began disappearing at night. Renan said the last time he saw Luciana, she was standing in the chapel doorway holding the doll, both of them humming together. After that, blackness. He remembered only waking in the woods alone. He died 6 months later in a psychiatric ward. Having scratched the words, "Ela é Deus em forma pequena," she is God in small form, into the wall with his fingernails. Asterisk. For 30 years, the doll vanished. Some said the church took it, locking it away beneath São Paulo Cathedral. Others believed it sank with a ferry that capsized near Belém. But those who know the rhythm of such curses understand. Evil never dies, it waits for attention, for belief, for breath. In 2018, it surfaced again, this time in the possession of an antique collector named Matthias Carvalho. Matthias didn't believe in curses, he believed in profit. Haunted relics fetched high prices among Western collectors. He cleaned the doll, photographed it, and placed it in a glass case in his showroom. He advertised it as the Satan's doll of Brazil, -1920 original. Within days, people began warning him online, "Don't keep it in your home. It carries something with it." One anonymous message simply read, "Return her to the ashes." Matthias laughed it off until the night he heard humming from his display room. He thought it was the radio. Then he realized the power was out. The next morning, he found the doll on his bed. He locked it in a box, nailed it shut. But the following day, the nails were bent from the inside. The doll sat on his desk again, its eyes now gleaming like wet glass. He began drinking. Friends said he grew paranoid, sleeping with lights on, muttering to himself. 3 weeks later, he was found dead in his chair. The coroner listed a heart attack, but the CCTV footage from his home showed something unsettling. At 2:13 a.m., the doll turned its head toward the camera and smiled. After that, it disappeared once more.
When the story reached journalist Anna Ribeiro in 2020, she felt compelled to investigate. Anna specialized in paranormal phenomena, but considered herself rational, a believer in psychology, not spirits. She tracked every rumor, every thread, every death. The timeline formed a pattern. Every 30 years, the doll resurfaced. Each time, death followed those who touched it. Each time, the phrase, "she wants to go home," appeared in witness accounts. Anna discovered something chilling buried in archived letters from 1990. Confession of a villager who had participated in Mariana Vasquez's execution. He admitted they had taken something from the witch's hut before burning it, a small porcelain figure, wrapped in human hair. He wrote, "It was not a doll made for play, but a vessel." Her words said it housed her second soul. "We burned her body, but not the other half." Anna realized then the doll was not possessed. It was Mariana, or worse, a fragment of something Mariana had invited. The more Anna uncovered, the more she began to dream. She saw the forest, the chapel, the doll sitting on a stone, whispering her name. When she awoke, her apartment smelled faintly of burnt wood. Her recordings became erratic. One ended with her whispering, "She's calling. I think she knows I'm writing about her." The last entry in her journal read, "The doll doesn't haunt places. It follows stories. The moment you speak of her, she finds you." Anna vanished 2 days later. And so, the legend continued to grow. Each telling gave it form. Each retelling gave it breath. Some say she exists now in digital form, that her spirit moves through words, through sound, through stories. That reading about her, speaking her name, or even thinking about her too long is enough to draw her attention, because she is learning, becoming more human with every believer. And if you listen carefully now, you might hear it too. That faint hum behind the quiet of the night, a lullaby, a child's voice, calling softly, "For you."
The doll stood still beneath the flickering candlelight, its once innocent porcelain face now cracked like ancient pottery. Each fracture seemed to smile, mocking, as if something deep within the clay had begun to breathe. The rain outside the farmhouse in rural Minas Gerais pounded harder now, as if the heavens themselves were trying to drown the memory of what was stirring inside that cursed house. Anna and her brother, Raphael, didn't speak much after the doll arrived. It had been found buried behind their family's old chapel, a relic wrapped in burlap and tied with strands of hair. Their grandmother, before she died, had warned them never to disturb the sleeping one. But children, as always, are curious. And Raphael, ever the skeptic, had dug it up with trembling hands. It began slowly, almost imperceptibly. At first, just whispers, soft, childlike laughter in the distance when no one else was home. The creaking of doors, even when the wind outside was still. Then, Anna noticed that every morning, the doll was not where they had left it. It would appear in the kitchen, then in her room, sometimes even beside her bed. Raphael accused her of playing tricks. She accused him back, but both knew, deep inside, that neither of them dared touch it anymore. The days stretched into nights filled with unease. The air inside the farmhouse thickened, heavy with an invisible dread. Mirrors began to fog from within, crosses turned upside down, and in the dead of night, something began scratching beneath the floorboards, something that sounded too deliberate to be rats. One evening, after another sleepless night of watching shadows crawl across her walls, Anna awoke to the faint hum of a lullaby. It came from the living room. She recognized the tune. It was the same song her grandmother used to sing to ward off evil spirits. Yet the voice was not her grandmother's. It was childlike, broken, like a phonograph record, slowing to its end. Anna followed the sound. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, each step echoing longer than it should. The air was cold, now unnaturally cold. As she turned the corner, she saw the doll sitting on the wooden table, its cracked lips parting slightly. The lullaby stopped. The doll's head turned toward her, and it smiled. For a brief moment, Anna couldn't move. Her breath caught in her throat, her heartbeat drowning out every other sound. The doll's glass eyes gleamed faintly red in the candlelight, and in that instant, she swore she heard a whisper slither through the air. "Eu volte. I have returned." The next morning, Raphael found her sitting on the floor, pale and trembling, the doll cradled in her arms. She wouldn't speak. Her lips moved silently, repeating words he couldn't understand. Raphael, though terrified, tried to make sense of it. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe his sister was losing her mind. But when he tried to take the doll away, Anna screamed a sound so raw, so primal, that he stumbled backward. From that day forward, Anna changed. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping. The corners of her room were lined with strange symbols drawn in charcoal-enchant sigils, some resembling crosses, others spirals or serpents devouring their own tails. She began muttering prayers in reverse, as if unmaking them. Raphael went to the local priest, Father Miguel, who listened with unease. When Raphael mentioned the name his grandmother once whispered, Bonca de Satanas, the priest, crossed himself and refused to speak further. "Burn it," Father Miguel finally said. "Burn the doll before it claims her soul completely." That night, Raphael prepared the fire. He doused the doll in oil and placed it in the iron cauldron behind the house. But as he struck the match, a gust of wind blew it out. He tried again, another gust. The third time, he shielded the flame with his hand. The fire caught. The doll began to blacken. Then it screamed. The sound was unmistakable, not wood crackling, not the hiss of flame, but a scream high-pitched human. It echoed through the valley, shattering windows and making the cattle in the nearby fields moan in panic. Raphael fell back, eyes wide. The doll twisted in the cauldron, its limbs writhing as though alive. Its porcelain face melted, revealing beneath it something that looked like glistening, pulsing. Then the fire went out. The night fell silent again, except for one thing, the faint sound of breathing. But it wasn't coming from Raphael. When he dared to look again, the cauldron was empty. The doll was gone. He turned toward the house, and through the window, he saw Anna standing there. The doll now back in her arms, completely untouched by flame. Her eyes glowed faintly red. From that night onward, Raphael documented everything. His diary, later discovered by local journalists decades after, was written in an increasingly frantic hand. The pages were filled with accounts of shadows that moved without light, doors that bled when opened, and Anna's voice changing into something deeper, older, unnatural. He wrote of her levitating one night, whispering in tongues he couldn't identify, of how her reflection no longer matched her movements in the mirror, of how, sometimes, he heard two voices speaking through her at once. On the 12th night, he wrote, "The doll is not a vessel. It is a prison, and she has freed what was trapped inside." Father Miguel returned days later with holy water and an assistant exorcist from Rio. When they entered the house, the air was suffocating, filled with the stench of sulfur and decay. Candles extinguished themselves as they passed. Anna was sitting in the corner, humming that same lullaby, her head tilted unnaturally to one side. The priest began to pray. At first Anna seemed unaffected, then her lips trembled. The doll in her arms began to vibrate violently, shaking as though something within it struggled to escape. The crucifix on Father Miguel's chest burned his skin. Anna's eyes rolled back, revealing only white. The house groaned, walls cracking as if something immense pressed against them from within. The exorcist began shouting the ritual Romanim prayers louder and louder, but the words turned to screams as Anna's body convulsed. And then, silence, a silence so deep it swallowed the world. When Father Miguel opened his eyes, Anna was gone. The doll lay on the ground, smiling. The only thing left of Anna was her voice, faintly whispering from the shadows, "He is awake." Over the following days, strange phenomena spread through the town. Livestock were found mutilated, churches desecrated overnight, and people claimed to see a child's silhouette wandering the streets at dusk, holding something in her arms. They said she smiled when you looked at her, and that if you followed her, you never came back. The mayor ordered the house burned down. It took 3 attempts, the first to fail when storms erupted suddenly, drowning the fire each time. On the 3rd attempt, lightning struck the roof, igniting it instantly. The entire structure burned in minutes, the flames devouring the night sky. When it was over, the only thing left untouched among the ashes was the doll. The relic was eventually locked away in a monastery vault, deep in the mountains, sealed behind iron gates, and blessed every year by priests who refused to touch it. But over time, the blessing rituals stopped. The records were lost. The monastery abandoned. And now, decades later, explorers say that when the wind is right, you can still hear that lullaby drifting from the ruins, soft, Janal calling, Ilvo, the voice of a child, the voice of something far older, waiting to be found again. The rain hadn't stopped for 7 days. The valley was drowning in a grey haze, where mist rolled like breath across the hills, and thunder spoke in a tongue older than man. The locals said it wasn't rain anymore, it was the earth weeping, trying to cleanse what had been unearthed. Somewhere deep in that valley stood the ruins of the farmhouse, blackened skeletons of walls reaching like charred hands toward the sky. Moss crept over the stones. The ground was slick with soot and silence. Yet, beneath the ruin, in a hidden chamber carved from ancient rock, the doll still sat, untouched. The monks who had sealed it there decades ago were long dead. The iron door had rusted shut, its crosses corroded and symbols faded. Only one thing remained uncorrupted: the doll's eyes, gleaming faintly in the dark. And then, one night, they opened. It was a storm that broke the silence. Lightning tore the horizon apart, and in the nearby town of Orop, a young historian named Lucia Vargas dreamed of a child with red eyes. In the dream, the child whispered, "Anamana." Lucia awoke, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding. For weeks, she'd been studying a local legend of Bonica de Satanás, the Satan's doll. Scholars dismissed it as folklore, a blend of colonial superstition and Christian fear, but something about it called to her. Every night, the same dream returned: Dana in the doorway, holding the doll, whispering, "He's waiting for you." Lucia, obsessed, decided to find the ruins. The villagers begged her not to go. They said no one should enter that valley after sundown, that even the animals avoided it. But curiosity is a curse of its own kind, and Lucia was not a woman easily frightened. She carried her camera, her notebook, and an old crucifix her grandmother once owned. She left at dawn. The road wound through forests that seemed alive, their trees bending inward as if listening. Every few steps, she felt the weight of unseen eyes. The air smelled of iron and decay. By the time she reached the remains of the farmhouse, dusk had fallen, and the mist thickened into something that felt almost solid. Lucia crouched beside the charred stones, tracing her fingers along the blackened earth. That's when she saw a faint glimmer of metal, half buried beneath the debris. She dug with her hands until she uncovered a rusted latch, leading downward, a hidden passage. The stairwell beneath was narrow and steep, the air chokingly stale. Her flashlight trembled in her hand, revealing symbols scratched into the wall spirals. Crosses, serpents biting their tails. Each step she took seemed to echo with another, softer one just behind her. She stopped, listened, silence, then a whisper, close to her ear, the voice of a child. Her flashlight flickered, shadows rippled across the stone, and there at the bottom of the stairs, something gleamed. The doll, perfect, preserved, its porcelain face flawless, its dress unstained by time. Lucia knelt slowly, her breath trembling. How are you still here?" she murmured. And then, as if answering, the doll's head tilted. That single movement shattered the air. A rush of wind howled through the chamber, snuffing her light. Lucia stumbled backward, clutching her crucifix. The darkness pulsed alive, aware. Then she heard the laughter. Soft, innocent, but layered one voice upon another, until it became a chorus. The same lullaby echoed faintly, the same from her dreams. Lucia felt her chest tighten. She tried to run, but something unseen gripped her ankle, pulling her to the ground. Cold fingers brushed her neck. Her flashlight rolled, its beam cutting across the walls. There were words written in blood, "Ewabru uporta." I opened the gate. The doll's eyes began to glow. Lucia screamed, but the sound never left her throat. The darkness poured into her mouth, suffocating her scream before it was born. She felt the world twist, the walls stretched, the floor breathing beneath her palms, and then visions, a child's voice whispering from every direction. Ana's face, pale and hollow, the farmhouse restored, vibrant, but wrong. The windows pulsed like veins, and figures moved inside, though there was no life. At the center stood the doll. Behind it, a shadow rose, immense and writhing, a form made of faces, thousands of them, all screaming in silence. Lucia's crucifix burned her palm. She heard a voice within her mind, not Ana, not the doll's, but something ancient and vast. "She was mine. You set her free. Now you take her place." When the villagers found Lucia 2 days later, she was standing in the middle of the ruins, eyes wide open, staring at nothing. The doll was gone. She didn't speak for weeks. When she finally did, it was in a language no one recognized: low, guttural, rhythmic, like a chant. The doctors called it trauma-induced psychosis. The priests called it possession. But at night, in the asylum where she was kept, the nurses swore they heard a child's lullaby echoing from her room. And sometimes, When they looked through the window, they saw a small porcelain face peeking from the shadows beside her bed. As the years passed, Lucia's story spread. Paranormal investigators arrived, drawn by curiosity and fame. Most returned with nothing but fear. A few never returned at all. One of them, a man named Gabriel Cortes, left behind recordings. The final tape, recovered from his camera, begins with static. Then his voice, "It's real. The doll, it moves on its own. I saw the eyes. They follow me. I can hear Anna whispering. It's not just one spirit, it's many, bound together, fed by fear, by belief." A sudden noise interrupts, a low hum, followed by a scream. Then, faintly, a child's voice, "He's free now." The tape ends. Rumors began that Lucia escaped the asylum. Some claimed to have seen her wandering the hills, carrying something wrapped in cloth. Others said she was found deep in the forest, kneeling before a circle of candles, the doll cradled in her arms, whispering, "He needs a new home." Those who ventured close enough said her eyes were not human anymore. The curse was no longer contained. Reports began surfacing across Brazil of families haunted by a laughing child's voice, of mirrors that reflected someone else's face, of toys moving on their own. Churches burned overnight. Children spoke languages they had never heard. And in every incident, someone mentioned seeing a small, porcelain doll, always the same, always smiling. The Vatican eventually sent envoys to investigate. Among them was Father Augusto Ramos, an experienced exorcist who had spent decades confronting demonic phenomena. He arrived skeptical, armed with relics, scripture, and faith. When he entered Lucia's abandoned asylum, the corridors smelled of damp and rot, paint peeled like scabs from the walls. In the room once belonging to Lucia, he found carvings covering every surface, symbols of protection interlaced with sigils of summoning. At the center of the floor was a single word, repeated hundreds of times, "Accord, awaken." Then he heard it, a faint giggle behind him. He turned. The doll sat in the corner, head tilted, eyes wide. Father Ramos raised his crucifix. In Namen, Patris et Filii e Spiritus Sancti. The lights exploded. Darkness swallowed him whole. He felt hands small, many crawl across his arms, his chest, his face. The giggling turned to screams, then to whispers that filled his skull. His crucifix melted in his grip. The ground beneath him pulsed like flesh. And in the center of it all, a voice rose, a woman's voice this time, calm and cold. "Faith means nothing here, Father. You're in my house now." He saw her then. Lucia, what was left of her. Her face half human, half porcelain, her smile sharp and glass-like. She held the doll close, their eyes glowing as one. Father Ramos screamed his final prayer as the walls began to bleed. The next morning, only his Bible was found. The pages were soaked, not with water but with something darker. They sealed the asylum after that. The government declared it unsafe, but some say, on stormy nights, light flickers from the windows, and if you listen closely, beneath the thunder, you can hear laughter, the sound of a child and a woman, singing together the same lullaby. "Dormi, dormi, meu pequeno." Sleep, sleep, my little one. It was no longer just a haunting. It was evolution. The doll had crossed beyond an object of possession. It had become a vessel of replication, infecting souls with memory, transforming belief into substance. Wherever fear existed, it could grow. And as the world grew more fascinated with darkness, with cursed stories and haunted relics, its influence spread. People posted photos online of strange dolls appearing in their homes. Some even mocked the legend, calling it superstition. But the truth is, the curse never needed belief, it only needed attention. Every whisper, every retelling, every gaze into its painted eyes gave it life, and through that endless chain of curiosity, it learned to travel. Somewhere tonight, a child in another country opens a parcel marked vintage Brazilian doll. Inside, beneath the wrapping paper, lies a porcelain face with perfect red lips and glass eyes that glimmer faintly in the dark. The child smiles, delighted. Outside, thunder rolls across the sky. In the distance, faint but unmistakable, the lullaby begins again. The world had moved on. The valley where it began was now a ghost of its own, forgotten, overgrown, and swallowed by the rainforest. Only a few scholars, ghost hunters, and lost souls whispered about the boneca de Satanás. Yet every few years, the whispers returned, louder, darker, and closer to truth. By the time Mariana Duarte, a documentary filmmaker, stumbled upon the legend. The story had become an urban myth, buried under skepticism and half-truths. She was known for uncovering unsolved horrors, the kind of stories that people refused to believe until she showed them proof. When Mariana found the last entry of Father Ramos' journal in the Vatican archives, she knew she had found her next project. His handwriting was frantic, the ink smudged with something that looked suspiciously like dried blood. The doll is no longer an object, it is thought itself. Every word written about it is another door opening. Every retelling is a prayer it answers. She smiled when she read it, part disbelief, part fascination. But that night, as she replayed the audio from her recorder, she froze. There was a sound she didn't remember capturing, a soft, childlike giggle. Then a whisper, low and clear, "You're telling my story now." Mariana's documentary began as research. She interviewed locals, priests, historians, and a few surviving members of the families once connected to the valley. Each person had a different version, but every story shared one thing: the doll always returns. A retired nun, Sister Celeste, told her, "It's not the same doll each time. It just looks the same. It wears faces like masks." Mariana laughed, politely dismissing the warning. But as the nights stretched longer and her obsession deepened, she began to dream dreams of the valley burning, of a woman half human and half doll whispering through smoke, and of a small porcelain figure standing at the edge of her bed. She woke one night to find tiny footprints in the dust on her floor. The next night, the camera she'd left recording by her bedside flickered to life. At 3:07 a.m. when she checked the footage the next morning, her heart turned to ice. There she was, sleeping peacefully. Then, the corner of the frame darkened, and from the shadow, a small white hand appeared. It rested gently on her shoulder. The voice of a child whispered in Portuguese, "Tell them I'm real." Mariana stopped filming after that. She told herself it was stress, fatigue, hallucination, but the footage didn't lie. So she did what every filmmaker does when fear becomes unbearable. She turned it into a story. Her documentary The Devil's Doll premiered a year later. It was praised as a masterpiece of supernatural realism. Viewers across the world streamed it, fascinated and terrified. The doll's image spread like wildfire across screens, thumbnails, and digital posters. People began claiming strange occurrences after watching it: whispers at night, flickering lights, objects moving by themselves. Some said they saw a girl's reflection behind them when they paused the film. Mariana, though, didn't see the success. She disappeared the night before the premiere. Her camera crew found her apartment empty, the lights flickering, the crucifix on her wall turned upside down. Only one thing was left behind: a small porcelain doll sitting on her desk, smiling. The authorities called it a publicity stunt. Her disappearance became part of the legend, fueling the film's notoriety. The doll became a global symbol of cursed cinema, spawning sequels, documentaries, and investigations, but none of them realized the truth. Each viewing, each replication, was feeding it. Every image of the doll carried a fragment of its cursed digital echoes of the original spirit. Through the screens, through the attention, it learned to move again. One night, in Tokyo, a young girl named Reiko watched the film alone in her room. The moment the doll appeared on screen, her phone glitched, showing static. When it cleared, the doll was no longer on the screen, it was behind her reflection in the monitor. Her parents found her the next morning, staring blankly, whispering in Portuguese. Soon, cases began to appear worldwide. A collector in London received a replica doll in the mail that he never ordered. A child in Canada drew the same porcelain face repeatedly, saying her imaginary friend asked her to. In Argentina, a priest live-streamed an exorcism on a possessed doll, resembling the same figure but halfway through. His stream cut to black, and his body was never found. Some experts suggested it wasn't possession at all, it was mimetic contagion, a curse carried through ideas, but priests disagreed. "It's not the doll," one said on national television. "It's what hides behind it. Every person who speaks her name opens a door. Every repetition strengthens the bridge." The audience laughed. Then, as the segment ended, the cameras for 1 second. Across every screen, the image of the doll flashed, smiling, unblinking. Years later, deep in the Amazon, a team of archaeologists uncovered an abandoned monastery. Its gates rusted shut. Inside, they found symbols scorched into the stone. circles, crosses, serpents devouring their tails, and in the center of the main hall lay a mound of burned dolls, hundreds of them, but among the ashes was one still intact. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Enrique Silva, picked it up carefully. "Remarkable," he murmured. "It's centuries old." As he turned it in his hands, something warm dripped from its cracked lips. Blood. He dropped it instantly, but the doll didn't fall. It hovered for a moment, its head twisting slowly toward him. Then, in a voice that wasn't his own, it whispered, "You should have left us buried." The footage from that dig was never released. The entire team vanished without trace. The legend evolved into prophecy. Ancient texts found in the same monastery revealed something chilling, a ritual known as Accord Infernal, the Infernal Awakening. It spoke of vessels created not to trap demons, but to contain fragments of a fallen angel, scattered across objects through human greed and curiosity. Each vessel called to the next, seeking reunion. Each bearer became a doorway, and in the margins of that ancient scroll, written in faint red ink, were the words, "When the last fragment finds its voice, the child shall rise again." No one knows how many fragments exist now. Some say there were 7 dolls made in total. Others believe there was only one, and it simply moves through time. What's undeniable is this: wherever the story of the doll is told, something stirs. People claim to hear tapping at their windows after reading about it. Some say their phones ring from private numbers during storms, and if they answer, they hear the sound of a child's lullaby, sung softly in Portuguese. A few even say that if you listen long enough, the voice changes, becoming your own. A journalist once asked a surviving monk, one of the last who helped seal the original doll decades ago, what he believed truly happened. The old man smiled faintly, his eyes hollow. It was never about the doll, he said. It was about belief. Evil doesn't live in objects, it lives in stories. Every time someone remembers, it breathes again. He paused, then whispered, "And now you've remembered it too. Tonight, perhaps you're reading this under dim light, the world quiet around you. You might feel it, the faint sense of being watched. Maybe it's the way the shadows move in your peripheral vision. Maybe it's nothing. Or maybe she's already there." The air grows colder. The floor creaks behind you. A whisper brushes the back of your neck, barely audible, but unmistakable. "Eu volte, I have returned." You look toward the sound, but there's nothing, only darkness. And yet, when you turn back to your screen, the reflection staring at you isn't quite your own. In every story, in every whisper, in every retelling, the curse grows stronger. The doll doesn't need to be found anymore. It only needs to be remembered. So remember this: never speak her name aloud, never hum her lullaby, and above all, never look away if you feel her eyes on you, because if you do, you'll hear it again, soft, childlike, and near. Sleep now, my little one. The lullaby begins. The screen flickers, and somewhere, unseen, the doll smiles.